Okay, JP, love your work. The last few you've been putting up have been outstanding, man. They're just really good. Now I got a 15-minute grind on this that I can put together for it. So just hang with me. I want to do a quick little brief. We're going to touch on dual diagnosis. We're going to touch on because of age. Then you'll get into pre-existing conditions, birth effects, car accidents, all kinds of things that basically durium and tritium off of hydrogen fusing into helium over here or whatever. And anyways, so the dual diagnosis at the psychological level is generally where I start for the prison set. And like I said, there's if you know how to win from the inside from that, you can make the E4 math problem of the impossible chess problem here. Where's the white tile with the key under it? Yeah, all right, sure. Warden, maybe this is the one that figured them out, and it helps real commonly get people into a set of things that gets them out of here early, on time, by any other standard, gravity. Now 12 rules. If you follow those rules, any one rule is the second rule. But at any rate, if you find out the matrix, if you word it very correctly. But at any rate, you know, in prison or in jail, you kind of got to go like, well, the game is actually to excel your weight lifting. Like you do push-ups, you write that down. One, that's a combatives. It's a physical fitness. Those are all, if you understand them right, you know, that's one of the rules that, yeah, if you understand that's a way to do that. But you have to continue that graph. It's not just note it there, just note it in continuance of that function. And I'm sure he'll get to something like that in here at some point in time when you don't know any difference. Firstly, yeah, there's supercomputers out there, but there's a lot of people in the room that don't use spreadsheet for just what it is. And like I said, that's excelling, you know, push-ups and then tracking it over a month and then saying, well, see how I increased, and then there's a graphing skill in there, and how there's also, that's a parallel of other functions and success or rules of order, marshmallow experiments, you know, like what were you doing in the box, how did you generalize it, how did you graph it, how did you present it, how did you, one of the 12 things in there. And that's where bottom comes in to get the best spring for it. And then of course, remember, we're always starting birth to death, so in a sense you're always at the bottom. That's why it kind of feels weird when you're sitting here with it and really kind of quantifying your historical model of those graphing vectors in terms of, from the differential there's a whole bunch of safety scaffoldings and other things that go into this. But like I said, Excel, all that. Read the newspaper. Keep the track of the day. The newspaper comes in every morning in jail. You have times for those systems. There's shower rotations. And then if anybody else had a problem with that, I would use that standard model for the warden to help augment the class, because then I want you to do this. I want you to get the paper out and physically do this path for this amount of time. And I can pretty that math equation up for any way I want, because the bottom limit on one of those things is going to be this first evaluation, general and well, beyond order is a note. It's like I said, that is chaos. Planck, you know, here anything we interject to nature is chaos. And that's what every step being so ordered is. And there's multiple paths of certain orientations from
Hello,
the
everyone.
first
I'm very
relativity.
pleased to welcome today.
He'll be getting into that here. This is one of the conversations.
One of the writers I admire for the content and for the quality of the prose itself. He's been compared to George Orwell.
One of the people I know.
Which is high praise indeed, as one of as one of Great Britain's finest essayists. Dr. Anthony Daniels, better known by his pen name Theodore Dalrymple. He worked as a prison doctor and psychiatrist, retired in 2005, but worked all over the world and traveled. And he's written many books, some of which have had a rather profound cultural impact, including Life at the Bottom, the Worldview That Makes the Underclass, 2001, where he discusses what you might describe as the philosophy of poverty, our culture, what's left of it, the mandarins and the masses, 2005, Not with a Bang, but a Whimper, the Politics and Culture of Decline, 2008, Spoiled Rotten, the Toxic Cult of Sentimentality, 2010, and The Terror of Existence with Catholic theologian Kenneth Francis in 2018. For The Spectator, he wrote a weekly column on his experiences as a prison doctor for 14 years. Those were later collected in various books. He wrote a weekly column for the British Medical Journal as well for 6 years, discussing medicine and literature. His essays have appeared in the finest newspapers and magazines in the world, including The Times, The Spectator, and The Wall Street Journal. Welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing to talk with me.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Good to have all the legacies.
I'm going to start by telling you how I found out about you. When I was working as a clinical psychologist, I had a social worker as a client who, immigrant, second-generation immigrant female, who had been a rather radically leftist thinker in her youth, and then spent 20 years in the social work trenches, and was eventually hounded out of her profession, hounded out and bullied out of her profession by the radical leftists themselves.
Using a model.
And she mentioned Life at the Bottom to me, and so I picked it up and read it, and I thought, I've never heard anyone state this so bluntly. What struck me, I guess, was three things. Was your apart from the quality of your writing and the content, the particularities of your experience. You said, for example, that you had dealt with poverty, with people who were in poverty in various places in the world, Africa, for example, and then in Great Britain, in the inner cities, in what you regard as the underclass, a permanent multi-generational segment of society that are, in some sense, they've fallen out of the bottom of the culture, in your view. And what you concentrated, you focused on the difference between that poverty
educational limit of Hancock
and the poverty of absolute deprivation.
When we take the person, if that was Jordan Patterson that worked and lived
you added another twist to it, which was you made a very, very strong case that there was a philosophy, in some sense, or maybe
very
an anti-philosophy.
That's the only one with the rightist is that it could be anybody at any time.
A worldview that
relative-wise
constituted the essence of the poverty that you saw in Great Britain, which you also regarded in many ways as more severe and less addressable than the poverty that you had seen in the developing world, for example.
Well,
so it was a combination of
high entropy or
broad
low
worldly experience.
It starts with high entropy as a state. A lot of the parts are broken down, but they're in low entropy. All the parts are easy
in some sense, but actually
to
never
put together
interact
the
with
machine that
your
you need
experience
to
as a
resolve
psychiatrist,
Africa.
and your
You have to
willingness to put
restart
down
the
these
society.
very
That whole
critical
critical infrastructure is off.
Certainly
So high entropy on high
virtually
entropy
measure,
of what could be
observations, which to me
designed to do it. Now,
rang
even though
true,
this model is there,
generally true,
the
and
steps
which I haven't
still
encountered with
require
any
a lot
other
more
thinker.
energy, where these are already F1 plus F2 minus
Yes.
F1.
Well, I didn't really.
That's why I start with
out
it.
any,
It's like, when you go to study it in something like,
preconception,
I
certainly
practice
not any
Yemen,
political
because I keep it in
preconception.
mind.
Just,
It goes back to the
I just saw a
box.
lot of patients and
Costs,
and
resources,
the penny began to
walking
drop
around at night,
about,
just regular safety stuff.
What their lives were
And,
like and what they
you know,
expected from life.
that being the first of the
Who
graphs
did
of
you
that
see?
that
Tell
teach them
everyone
that, then they
about-
kind of
about the
understand, well,
nature.
when
I
things
worked
misbehave from
in
this
an inner
index,
city hospital. The inner city hospital was
they
right next door to
act
the
a
prison.
little different by
And the main
IH,
difference
at
between
least.
these two
I'm
great
sure we get
institutions was
GPT-3
that
to
far
program
more
it,
violence
but
in
quite
the
a bit
hospital,
away from
than in
Africa.
prison.
Now,
But,
that's useful in Britain,
I would work in the morning in the
but
hospital,
in
and
terms
then I
of
would go and
that
work in
diversifying
the prison,
consistency and law of diminishing
in the
exchange over
afternoon.
there,
And
it starts to
and
fall
often
away.
at
Entropy
night
is
and
going to rip
weekends as
that
well.
all. Costs are not what are
so
standard
in the-
models in these
in the
places. They're like,
hospital,
well, that's an easy
saw
fix because it was just the
maybe,
observation of not knowing that
something
trick,
in the region
planning a little
of,
bit of timing
I
and doing
didn't
it,
count exactly,
which is
10
the
to
same
15,000
problem anywhere
cases
else.
of
But
attempted
it's
suicide, or
compressed
at
into a
least of
finished state where
suicidal
these had
gestures
all
that
been
varied
built
from,
over eschatology. the
real attempts at
esoterics of
suicide
eschatology here
attempt
to say
bring,
that they were built there, because basically we're still going back to
heal,
two sticks for heat being a relative energy under some systems, because, well, we're not talking about necessarily fire, but certainly pollution of having whatever chemicals and toss in it, and then regionally that's wasted energy. It just takes time to put all the plastic bottles in a system to get recycling going. When you're having a hard time feeding your family the fish you're catching out of that river, and if you took time to collect plastic bottles to do it, you know, and that's why the nature of high entropy in America, it's like lots of different ways you can do things, and they all have super high entropy of how these stone mills and other businesses have lots and lots of moving parts that are well understood in terms of the motor, serviceability, timelines, and systems. Where when you get back over here, it's nowhere near those standards. And when you go into Vice in New York City, and people are shooting up, you know, you go back to, well, what is clinical psychology here? Asking the same definition or example and expecting a different result. Well, the clinic starts there on the corner by the observation. And then, like you would observe somebody in clinical studies, you're basically recounting that field and saying that is clinical. That is what is critical here to understand those movements, because you would see something that they're doing that is off. That is just a bad decision, poor money-making things. They're even wearing it based on the thing. They'll call it whatever, but they just need somebody to help them, whether arresting standards or something local. Now, we can't ever rely on the local for that, because, well, there's a choice and freedom. There's so much high entropy out there about the state of the universe and the way to redesign it. What is the most efficient model? Well, there was a time it was like, well, Ford, you know, it's like, well, we need battery cards right now. Is the hostess with the mostest supposed to turn this over?
Well, I'll deal with why I started to communicate it. Was that it was so terrible that it would... that I would have found it very difficult to keep it to myself and remain sane. In fact, my predecessor in the job, I found little bottles of vodka everywhere where he went, because I think he had found